Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and welcome to Finding Me on the ITV networks. I'm continuing my discussion with Shafinaz Hassan, author, publisher, sociologist, and also an amazing and talented young woman. Shafinaz has written a string of books, I think, that are very relevant to South African society, but specifically to us, to me as a Muslim woman, interrogating the society in which we live, and of course the very many biases and challenges that Muslim women in South Africa face, well, perhaps not only in South Africa, but the world over. We are in struggling times, we're in very challenging times, not only with the issues that confront Muslim women, but the issues that confront Muslims per se. And one of those issues is the whole concept of Islamophobia. And Shafinaz tackles a little bit of that in the book, The Economics of Love and Happiness. And I want to just bring that out a bit today in the discussion and then go into her other series, which is very, very inspiring, and especially for young people, Nisa Kamar. But I'd like to introduce Shafinaz again. Assalamu alaikum and welcome, Shafinaz. Thank you for making this extra time for me.
It's always great to be on your show. Jazakallah khair for having me.
So, Shafinaz, I mean, you've put together, there's an interweaving of very many themes here. Of course, the focus, as we spoke about in the previous issue, in the previous interview, was about the transacting of the bodies of Muslim women or women per se. So you either trade in the body, you barter it, you sell it. In a way, you use it, or how you view it is also a form of a transaction. But in the story, you bring in certain characters, and you concluded the previous interview by saying that there might be things that are offensive that you have written that people might disagree with, but they occur nonetheless, and it needs to be spoken about. And I think that's a problem. I've read recently very many tweets also from some shuyukh who are beginning to teach the whole concept of, ikhtilaf, of difference, recognizing difference, being able to talk about it and disagreeing about it, but not, going berserk about it. And wonderfully also, I'm one of the lecturers that I work with at UNISA has actually reintroduced the logic into a particular theme a particular module that he's teaching. And he says logic is very important in understanding how to debate or how to argue. So you have either an argument or you have a fight. An argument will have logic, but a fight is always just about asserting yourself, that control. It's only your viewpoint and no one else's viewpoint. And I think that part of that is what you remind me about when you said, I'm writing things that are unpleasant, things that people maybe might not want to hear, but it's important nonetheless for us to speak about it. Because when we start speaking about it, we can start finding solutions, isn't that?
I think that's very much part of joining the conversation, is presenting a view and presenting a finding and observation in a way that is accessible to people, which is why I really enjoy writing fiction out of most of my research, and allowing people a right of response, so to speak. So whether there's an attack through verbal or other means, mostly, we're in an age of information where there's information in front of you all the time. But there must be that right of response in a logical and in a way that...
In a coherent way.
Yes, in a coherent way, which is when you speak about, having logic and creating and granting access to a conversation. So we provide these platforms, and writing is one form of them, and hopefully hope to engage an audience that's willing to sort of join the table in that sense.
So recently I interviewed another young lady who also wrote on a very difficult issue, and most of her book was where her husband actually discovers that her husband is actually gay, that she's no longer married to a straight man, as you may say it.
Okay.
And of course she's also a Muslim author, and I asked her, was it difficult writing about that, because you're addressing an issue from a Muslim community's perspective, and it's considered a taboo subject, but the reality is there, it occurs, it needs to be discussed, and we need to find out how to respond to these issues, because just going crazy and name calling doesn't help in any way. So in this case, in this instance, you also write about uncomfortable things. Let's go to the Islamophobia. What made you include that in this book?
We can't pretend and sweep issues under the carpet, because we're never going to heal from that. But at the same time, if we believe that we're insular and we're living in a bubble and this and that doesn't happen to us, then we're not progressing. We're part of a global community. We're part not just of a global ummah, but we interact in so many ways, economically and socially, throughout the world. And Islamophobia is not just an issue that happens out there somewhere to people in Australia or in the UK or whatever, or in Trump's America, so to speak. It is happening in South Africa. We're extremely, extremely blessed to have a country where we're allowed to wear our Islam, where we're allowed to take out a musalla in a public space if we needed to, on the side of the road, and pray our salah. So it's not that we're being vilified or being exempted from practicing Islam, but there are pockets of society that live by creating fear in communities. They create fear because there's a kind of, when followers have a common enemy, then they pay a membership fee to an organization. It comes down again to transacting with people. And I raise the issue of Islamophobia because in the case of Romina Desai, the artist, her work gets vandalized by this outfit, and the gallery that keeps her work is actually sort of bullied into hopefully taking down her artwork, and absurd kind of rationalizations given. And on the one hand, you can see that out there, and these outfits do exist. This very right-wing kind of thinking does exist to vilify the brown other, the black other, and anything that can be sort of seen as part of that. And it's problematic. And when we establish that it's problematic, we can do what we can as ambassadors of Islam, each and every one of us, to break down that in small ways. It doesn't have to be, we don't have to be violent about it.
No,
it's the conversation that you have with somebody standing in the supermarket queue. It's trying to help somebody with your hijab on. It says, a Muslim person helped me to pack the boot of my car. It's a silly little example, but it's about extending our humanity, really, so that what somebody else tells them and puts sort of like stuff into their heads must be allowed to be broken down, because every day somebody is going to be putting negative, and we can be the force of the positive.
And so it comes out again, like what we've always said, is that by default you're an ambassador of Islam. So in every way, when you conduct yourself, be Muslim, isn't it?
Be Muslim.
Because
Quite
people are
precisely
observing
that.
you. Yes.
Yes, absolutely that. Remember our common humanity, and the message that you put out there when you step out of your home and you call yourself a Muslim. There were a few media sort of queries and interviews a couple of months ago when an organization on Facebook, which had a big Facebook following, was on an anti-halal campaign.
Yes.
And they were talking about halal goods, boycotting some of the outlets.
And there was a priest that was leading
because
this,
they were
isn't it?
keeping
Yes.
stuff with halal on it. And I don't need to take any of the brand names, but this was sort of absurd fear-mongering. That's all that it came down to boycott certain spaces who were keeping stuff with, consumables with halal labels, because they made all kinds of allegations about where the money was going. And this kind of absurdity needs to be fought against. Whether we're having the conversations or one-on-one in your workplace, open a space to the conversation and say, halal is really a dietary recommendation. That Muslim people will look for that stamp because we know it's safe, that we can eat
consume
this.
it, yes.
That's what it comes down to. It doesn't step on anyone else's rights, and it might actually help someone who's looking for, like I sometimes look at the kosher label because I know that it's less likely to have a certain kind of a dairy if you have a dairy allergy. So it's good to have these stamps and controls.
It's all about having information.
It's about information, precisely that. You know that it's been through some kind of vetting process, and you understand that it's safe for this and this reason.
And it's strange that you talk about that, because I know when I follow on Twitter some of the individuals in the US, and they had this from 9/11 onwards, the question that was constantly asked is, do you know a Muslim? How many Muslims have you met? Have you encountered a Muslim? Have you spent time with a Muslim? Have you spoken to a Muslim?
Absolutely.
Before you formulate all of these kinds of thoughts or imaginations in your mind, almost as if there's some kind of an alien being, who is here to take over your space. Like, for example, in South Africa, we have this concept of the foreigners are coming to take our jobs. Muslims are aliens. They're coming to take over the planet. It's a craziness.
It's unfortunate.
Yes.
Because we have the responsibility to see a different view, to obtain more information. My mum grew up saying we used to always think the Russians were aliens because of the American media, right? So she said, just imagine as children what we thought. And then I attended a conference in Berlin a few years back, and this is not a predominantly Muslim country, but there's a large Turkish community who are living in ghettos and not given all the resources that should be available to a population of a country. But the university was giving out cards, postcards that said, be Muslim, be Christian, be Berlin. And so they were trying to send this idea that these are the two major denominations, and if you're proud of being a Berliner, then it's about breaking down that wall that exists in your mind as well, bringing down the wall. This was their whole sort of market, like sort of focus. And I thought it was really beautiful that they were doing that from that perspective.
And so part of this book also then targets this whole concept of stop, I think we're discussing a lot of our problems. We're looking inside, and I like that. It's always rather than somebody else out there, let's just focus here. And Muslims in South Africa also have to recognize that we're not just looking out there. There are real issues here which we need to internalize and recognize, and that if we don't wake up and, as they say, smell the coffee, soon we're going to be real targets, and then it becomes harder to encounter that. We're going to a break. When we come back, I just want to conclude very quickly by you telling us who is your favorite character in the economics of love and happiness, and perhaps which is the most encouraging scene for you. And then we're going to discuss your other books, your short stories, Nisa Kamar. We'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment of the second interview with Shafinaz Hassan. And we're talking about her book, of course, the themes that are unraveling in the economics of love and happiness, and then basically its relativity or its relation to the South African Muslim community. Now, Shafinaz, I'm really intrigued because there are so many powerful characters here. But I know that when you're writing, you have a favorite. I mean, it's just, it would be natural that you would have a favorite. So who is your favorite in the economics of love and happiness? And perhaps which scene, after you wrote this, because sometimes when you write things and we go back to, oh, wow, like, did I really write that?
Oh, wow. I hope I could do that.
But, this part, like, really got to me. So did you have those, eureka moments?
So I had said in the previous interview, focused on the book, that you do get to know your characters very intimately. Otherwise, I think as a reader, you can pick up if it's a very sort of one-dimensional character. I often find in my editing that I find a character very flat, and then I've got to really get to know them, even if I don't like them. So it becomes a bit like a mother working around different personalities. And but if I had to choose a favorite, it would be Romina's Aunt Sadia. Because I've had strong female characters in the generation above me. I still do. My grandmother is 92. Yes. My grandmother, my mom, my aunt, and my grandmother's sisters. And I call them the common WhatsApp group because they're always looking out for each other.
The common WhatsApp group.
The sisters are always calling each other when someone's ill and all of that. So what I'm saying is I've learned from that, and so I have such great regard and for a sisterhood. And Sadia embodies all of that. Being Romina's aunt, they have a friendship, and yet they have this respectful generational kind of relationship. Romina is orphaned, Sadia is her aunt without children. They have that bond that I think is what holds them together, what carries them through life, and whatever they might be experiencing at that time in positive and negative ways. And they can be very honest with each other. They can have it out, and they can enjoy intimate moments of just remembering the past.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, all the great women in my life as well. And it's hard to imagine, that very soon, the world will be an emptier place when they're all gone.
Absolutely. And I think those goodbyes actually mean more, because when I just left my grandmother on Saturday, and she's 92, and her parting words to me were, "Inshallah, we'll meet again."
Inshallah.
And there's more meaning in that.
Of course. So tell me, and the eureka moment when you were reading, and like any particular passage or scene or moment that stood out for you?
I think for me, and I choose to read it often, is chapter 3, because she goes to Mumbai. And so it's such a beautiful I have this sort of romance with certain cities I've traveled to in the world, and Bombay is definitely one of them.
Mumbai, really, I would have to disagree with you.
Okay. We should travel there together sometime, inshallah.
Not and right so you now, not after what they doing to the Muslims.
You can see, it's just about the observations and the experience you have of a city. So there's nothing political about that chapter. It's purely experiential. It's purely aesthetic. It's actually not a very glamorous city, because there's a lot of poverty. It's And I say that in that. So I'm definitely not glamorizing it, but it's just when you can feel humanity in a place. I enjoyed Mumbai better than New York.
Oh yeah, no,
But
I
when
would
you can
agree with
feel
that.
that sort of that weight of human struggle, I think that has something to do with the realness of an experience.
So tell us now, so writing, from this very intense lens, then moving to Nisa Kamar. What is Nisa Kamar about, and how many have you written, and how did the project start?
So the Nisa Kamar series really, sort of started, the seed started because my nieces are growing up. My eldest niece is now 12, and she would call me up every time she read a new novel, and this would delight me no end because I loved reading from a very young age as well. And she literally gobbles up novels that you give her. I don't think we can even keep up anymore as even as an auxiliary parent, and the others as well now, the younger ones. And I wanted to write, I started remembering what I was reading as a young child. And I wanted to write what the gaps were. A character that filled those gaps, which is a character like me, a character like one of us, like one of these little girls that I see growing up in front of me. And Nisa Kamar was born, so to speak. And so she's a young girl growing up in present day Johannesburg, going to an Islamic school and facing whatever issues that children her age are facing, regardless of what background they come from. And this is the other thing, is that I don't just write for a Muslim audience, I write for a mainstream audience. And that audience must also be able to have a window into what it means to be a young Muslim girl growing up in South Africa.
And that's why I titled this particular interview also Finding Me, because that's where we are. We're in a quest in South Africa as Muslim women in a cosmopolitan society, as a minority, faced with very many stereotypes, as you say, the way in which the Western media portrays us, the mindsets that have been created. It's a challenge to find you.
And to be visible.
Yes.
It's okay to be visible. In fact, it's very important to be
be
visible,
visible, yes.
and to join the conversations wherever we are seen and available. And so Nisa Kamar 1 was launched in 2016.
Okay, that has a particular title, right?
That's Nisa Kamar and the Master of Jinyaville, which was an adventure story because we start off with 10-year-old Nisa who's finding her feet. She just, sort of wants to be like not picked out of class and ask questions. She's very sort of unassuming, just does her work and goes back home and helps out with chores as the eldest female child and does what she needs to do to exist. And then an opportunity arises where she has a gift she finds. She has a beautiful relationship with her grandmother who gives her strength in a sense, especially when she's navigating this gift, so to speak. And she has an opportunity to save her school from a troublemaker and what we call the Master of Jinyaville, which is sort of the main villain of the story. And so she emerges from this triumph of good versus evil as a much more of herself. It is kind of a coming of age story, a triumph of good versus evil. And you see the new Nisa in Nisa Kamar 2, which is Nisa Kamar and the Rainbow Healers Society, where she joins a group of friends, young students from different schools, who get together and do something for the community in little and big ways. And sometimes their parents help to like sort of put a bookshelf together or help with creating a yoga studio or whatever the case might be. So you have these young people who get together and form a safe space really, and they have a green space where they grow vegetables and they give back to the community in certain ways. And I want to plant and implant the idea in every young person who reads this, that you can do that. Even if 5 or 10 friends get together, you can do something. It doesn't have to be big and outstanding,
yes.
but it can make a difference.
And everybody
in your
can do a little something, isn't it?
Yes. And even if it's a space where you can get together to do homework, you don't know what an impact you're having on the person next to you, because it does become a safe space.
Yeah, and somebody perhaps is struggling, and maybe you are just the last resort that gives that little bit of hope. I know I've had this discussion with my daughter as well, and sometimes she would put things out there and I would say, but why are you doing this? And she said, Mommy, you don't realize how many people are out there who want to see that somebody's maybe having a similar thought as them, or was maybe having a similar feeling to them. And she says, Mommy, since I put that out, there are people reaching out to me, which is wonderful, because in a way now we can start to help each other.
And you know what's out there. You put a feeler really for what's out there. So one of the main themes of Nisa too is bullying in the school environment. So I do take on that topic, and these children find a way to actually talk about it. And so it is really about not just writing solutions, but creating a platform where children who read this must think those solutions through individually and tailor those solutions for the individual
But I think more important than it also, but to recognize, so even if you're not being bullied, but when you read this and you say, oh, this one is doing that to that one, it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
We need to do something
to
about
actually
it.
stand up
Yeah.
to it.
Because, funny, my son and I were just talking about it also the other day, and I was telling him about the hadith. I find it a very intriguing hadith. And it's the hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam where he says, Bada al-Islam ghariban fasata'udu kama bada fatuba lil-ghuraba. So Islam began, strangely, and it will return to this kind of strangeness, and glad tidings to those who are strange. And we were trying to figure out the meaning, and so we read a couple of different explanations, and it was about, well, the Prophet ﷺ, but some of the interpretation to this hadith, it says this, that there will come a time where very few people will stand up to oppression, or will stand up to to evil acts, etc. So blessed are those people who will confront things that are going wrong, or injustices, etc. Yeah, and if you really look at it today, in the times that we are in, also in most situations where you see injustices, even between children, very few will stand up to those injustices. You find that people will rather be quiet, will turn the other, just turn away and pretend that it doesn't exist, or make as if it's not of relevance for them, so we don't want to get involved. It's almost, it's literally a handful, even amongst children in the interaction. So when you're talking to your kids and you ask them, okay, you saw this, what did you do? No, mommy, I couldn't get involved, or no, I didn't do anything, or no, I didn't say anything. People just don't stand up to injustice. And perhaps that's why the Muslim majority countries, in a way, also are in the rut that they are in, because we just stand back and let people run roughshod over us.
It's not necessarily apathy, because I think that children especially don't have the tools, and we need to equip them.
Exactly.
In many cases, children witnessing an incident of bullying or understanding of it are just as disempowered as the person being bullied. And so give them the tools, because there's willingness. I really believe that. If you're able to see right from wrong, and if they can come home and talk about it, it's because they feel indirectly bullied by the situation, and they're thinking, what could I have done? But children don't have exactly, we're not necessarily born with those tools. We're born with survival instinct, especially when you're in a small body that can be hurt. So that survival instinct, and then they go back and actually have a moment to think about it. Give them the tools, and next time they will be able to handle the situation, or gather a group and then handle the situation. And there's safety in numbers as well.
Yeah, but it's true, because like this, I think of, going back to my own example, so many times in my younger days, where I would see, for example, even with animals, an animal being hurt, and then you just drive past and you say, oh, but what could I do? But now if I see an animal hurt on the road, or a cat bumped, or a bird that's injured, the first thing is I tell myself, you have to stop. Whether you can or cannot do something, you have to stop. First, go and check if it's alive. Move it out of the road. Do something, you understand?
Right.
And if so, we have to tell children also, teach them. Say, if you see an injured animal, this is how you should behave. Don't just see it and feel sorry. It's all about action. It's
and
not,
making a difference.
Talk to yourself, and that's why I asked you if you talk to your characters, because I think it's important to talk to yourself also,
right,
to create that consciousness. And we're almost at the end, but you're writing a third one on Nisa Qamar, isn't it?
Well, Nisa Qamar 3 is due for launch next month, inshallah. Okay. It's called Nisa Qamar and the Legend of Kauthar, and this has been in the waiting for a while, because it was entered as a manuscript for the Sanlam Prize, and it was shortlisted last year. And inshallah it'll be due out next month, with a story more about, obviously Nisa is now 12 years old, and she's traveling with her school to Cape Town for the first time on an excursion. So you actually, she encounters Islam, the beginnings of Islam in South Africa. And so it's also a book that I use to teach that in a way. And the Legend of Kauthar, though, refers to the understanding that we should have of appreciation and gratitude and enhancement of life. So, with the Quranic ayah of, if you are grateful, I will give you more. So she reflects on that. And each of the books, each of the Nisa books, Nisa Qamar 1, her grandmother teaches her Ayatul Kursi and the 3 calls, and the power of the verse. Because we're reading sort of the Harry Potters and that sort of thing, and the reliance that magic might solve your problem. But here's a real life example of how powerful our verses from the Quran are, and allowing a Muslim child to say, well, it's kind of wow to be Muslim,
Yes, exactly.
So even in Nisa 2 with the Rainbow Healers, she learns verses of the Quran where she can deal with pain, where you're allowed to deal with pain. And then in 3, the verse, Surah Al-Kawthar is sort of something that she gets to reflect on eventually, and she sees how the dots can be joined
It's very
in her
intriguing
treating,
as
in
you
her,
speak
in her
about
learning.
this. Yeah, I think maybe after I finish my next part of writing, I should pick up the Nisa Kamar books
I
and
certainly
make
hope you do.
and make an effort to go through them. I don't think it will be a task. It will perhaps be a very beautiful journey. But I like that idea because it's the way of teaching the younger ones, and now I have an additional responsibility with my grandchildren, so I have to find something to read to them, hopefully. But thank you very much, Afinas, for sharing this and making this time. But more importantly, I think I need to thank you for not only reaching out to the older audience, but to reaching out to the younger ones as well, especially through the Nisa Kamar books.
I'm hoping through the Nisa Kamar books, while I've been writing for young adults and younger learners, that some of the adult readers will pick up these books and remember their childhood as well.
Yeah, and most importantly, find perhaps new ways of teaching their children.
Inshallah,
Yeah.
and bridging those
Because
gaps.
change is important, and change is the only constant in the world. But through change, we get better.
Ameen.
So thank you again, once again. في أمان الله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.